Welcome to this Farming for a Better Climate podcast.
We talk about sustainable, and the description was, if my marriage was sustainable, I'd be pretty depressed with it. I'd like it to be regenerative and get better over time.
My name is Seamus Murphy, and on today's podcast, beef consultant Robert Ramsay speaks to estate manager Sam Parson from Balcaskie Estate in Fife. The conversation touches on topics such as organic farming, regenerative agriculture, and the practicalities of bale grazing and rotational grazing systems. Scotland has ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2045 and 2050. The work that Sam and the team at Balcaskie are doing is a good way to show how beef farming can be done in an economically viable and environmentally sustainable way. It's a really interesting listen, and I hope you enjoy it. Make sure and like and share and follow Farming for a Better Climate on Facebook and Twitter.
Good morning, Sam. How are things this morning?
Good morning, Robert. Very well. All sunny.
Good. So the combine's rolling in Fife this morning?
No, we had quite a lot of rain yesterday.
Yeah. It's a tricky season already, isn't it? But hopefully the forecast got some better weather in store for us, or some more like today anyway. What is your job title? You're at Balcaskie Estate in Fife, but what's your role at Balcaskie?
Yeah, so I am the Farms and Estate Director for the Anstruther family on Balcaskie Estate, and oversee basically what goes on the estate.
Yeah, and the estate is, can you describe the estate a bit? You know, what size is it and what's involved?
Balcaskie is about 4,500 acres, and we farm in hand just about 2,500 acres ourselves, and then we've got let farms as well. And the other than the normal sort of estate activities of forestry and house lettings, etc., we also have a food production site for other people to rent space. We have our own butchery and a pub and restaurant. The farming enterprises really have been realigned over the last 5-6 years to try and feed into end consumer, being our own customers, rather than commodity markets. And so the farming business has swung from being predominantly arable with a suckler beef herd on LFA land to becoming livestock orientated and organic, and moving towards regenerative over that time.
Regenerative agriculture, can you give us a bit of indication, or a bit of, it's obviously a pretty complex topic, but what's it all about?
Well, the best description I was given by somebody was that we talk about sustainable, and the description was, if my marriage was sustainable, I'd be pretty depressed with it. I'd like it to be regenerative and get better over time. Well, that was a really good description of a position that we'd come to over a sort of the Anstruther family had done a review on the farming, or on the whole estate actually, and seen a sort of 50-year, they look at 50-year windows. And over the last 50 years, they looked at lots of indicators to see whether or not maybe over the next 50 years, things were going to improve or get worse. And there was a significant concern over the risk versus reward and the damage that was being done to long-term assets of soil, or environmental, or whatever, social, all those things. There was a serious risk of that getting worse if they didn't change. And so we set on this path of looking at regenerative agriculture as being a sort of a holistic approach to not only improving the margins that we earn from the farm, and how we do it so that we're putting back more than we're taking out effectively, and hopefully start to see soil health build, and we earn off the back of that.
So, Sam, you mentioned 50 years, your 50-year planning cycle. It seems, it's an amazingly long time. We've got a lot of farm businesses where we're looking 2 and 3 years into the future. With looking 50 years into the future, was climate change a big driver to moving towards a more regenerative and holistic system?
Yeah, it was. 2 or 3 year predictions you can do accurately, or reasonably accurately. 50-year ones you can't. But there are certain things that you can see a pattern, and climate change is one of those that we can't deny it. I don't imagine we'll be growing champagne in Fife, but within 50 years, but we might be. What we've all seen in the last 20 years is a change in the pattern of weather. So even though we might have only seen a small increase in rainfall, or those broad ideas over a whole year, rainfall's rainfall, but actually it's when we get it that matters, and when we don't get it, it matters more. And that resilience was becoming more of an issue. The sort of ups and downs of whether it's a cereal harvest after 2018 with a serious dry spell. We've got less of it, but it's worth more money. And at the end of the day, the result's about the same. But you couldn't sustain that for a long period of time. So yeah, it was probably that sort of 50-year cycle. Climate change was one of the things that was almost a certainty.
And the Anstruther family are very legacy focused and driven, aren't they? They're not. It's not all about profit. It's about that bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the principles behind what we were trying to do, or the Anstruthers had set out to do, was to leave behind something more than they started with. And you can do that in lots of different ways. You can do it in cash, you can do it in buildings, you can do it in statues, or you can do it in environmental improvement. And the decision was made to invest the money and the profits that the farm make back into improving the social, economic, and environmental impact of the estate. And
so you are organic, the whole estate?
No, we're still in transition. We didn't convert the whole of the in-hand farm in the first year. We started in 2016, and we're bringing blocks into the organic rotation as we go. So we started with 600 hectares, and we're probably now 900. We'll end up, we've got some more land coming back in hand. We'll end up fully converted by 2022. So we've just done it in a sort of phased approach, and it's really livestock led. So as we build the livestock numbers, we can convert more land. But we also grow organic cereals as well, which are targeted towards milling.
And would the organic cereal element, or would the cereal element of your business work without livestock in it?
No, we did quite a lot of work initially before we set out on the organic route, and that's one of the reasons we've taken longer to do it rather than just flicking the switch and becoming organic in 2016. Very few examples exist of people who have gone stockless organic and remained in organic production for a long period of time. A lot of people do it and then have to come back out after 5, 10, 15 years. And because we're looking at 50-year cycles, we're looking at how sustainable is that. So I think the livestock really form the backbone of the fertility build, but they also form the backbone of the regenerative soil health. And the use of livestock and how we manage them is a significant tool in our armory effectively now, where we don't have chemicals, fertilizers, etc.
Yeah, excellent. It's really interesting, and I think at this stage I'd quite like to drive down into the cattle enterprise. And so we've heard regenerative and sustainable and all the buzzwords, but what actually are you doing on the ground with regard to cattle?
Well, at the same time we started all of the exciting new changes to organic conversion, we also had looming over us Brexit, US trade deal, all the other loss of subsidy, all the other things, which was putting additional risk on the business in terms of subsidy. And at the same time, we had some vegan pressure coming from another side. We had social issues with was environmental pressure on keeping livestock. All of those things led us to look at a risk model for our cattle and sheep enterprise. And we were running a pretty traditional housed in the winter suckler system, fattening on grass silage, whole crop and barley and beans, fairly normal, nothing high pressure. It was all relatively extensive. But if we did a model which took out a significant chunk of our income from subsidy, then we needed to be sustainable beyond Brexit. And looking at the numbers, I needed to take £200,000 worth of costs out of our livestock enterprises to be able to manage a 20% decrease in red meat values and a 50% decrease in subsidy. And I looked and scratched under the surface of all sorts of small bills and realised that we weren't going to get there. And the biggest ones were taking out the feeding of cereal and the housing of cattle. And it led us down the route of the extended grazing. We find that livestock seem to spend another week every year in the shed, and it sort of adds up. We were housing cattle for over 6 months a year, 7 months quite easily, and the cost of that was too high. We couldn't grow enough straw to do that ourselves. We were buying it in, and so that cost was added. And this system looked like the sort of silver bullet for all our issues, where we changed to a rotationally mob grazed system, storing up grass ahead of ourselves, trampling half of what was stored back into the ground, which sounded wasteful, but the proof is in the pudding. We could then hold cattle out for longer during the season. And last year we managed to get, we did a trial with 87 cows, bale grazed throughout the winter, and they only came in to calve, and some of them were back out within 2 or 3 weeks again. And so that cost saving for us on that group of cattle, I think, was somewhere in the region of 17,000.
It's a game changer, isn't it?
So total game changer. And added to that, it actually improved the soil they were on. We used some fairly rough, poor grassland, which rather than plough it up and reseed it, which is never very successful in my view, unless we crop it as well, and it wasn't suitable for that, we introduced herbal seeds via the hay that we rolled out. And we're starting to see new grass species, more productive grass species, deeper rooting species appear where we were bale grazing. Yep. So we'd improved the soil, we'd reduced our cost of production, we'd saved buying grass seed, and I felt a lot fitter rolling some bales around in the winter.
Which would do no harm at all. Now, we'll come back to bale grazing in a wee while, I think, but if I could ask at the moment, what does Balcaskie grazing system look like today? Is it just young stock, or are cows in this system as well? How often are you moving them?
Okay, we've got, roughly speaking, at the minute we're running 300 suckler cows and then following replacements, and we're running all young stock and fattening stock as well, which we actually got rid of quite a few this year early, but we're running a mob of 200 14-month, 15-month-old young stock. So we're running 5 mobs at the minute, which consist we've got 2 groups of 100 cows, 1 group of 200 young stock, and then 2 groups of around 50 cows and replacements. Just because of breeding, we've had to keep them separate while the bulls are out, but they'll all be joined up later. And
are you multi-sire mating in there?
Yeah, we are. So in the 100 cow mobs, we're putting in 3 bulls. We're sort of feeling our way with that a bit. We're not sure if 3's a crowd.
It's a difficult one because 3 is a crowd, but 2's a big gamble if one's not working.
I'm thinking more like four's insurance. 4's insurance quickly, and then take 2 out. Once they've gone through the first 6 weeks or so, 3 weeks, whatever.
To me, I think 4, you establish a pecking order and it stays. It's a different discussion, isn't it? But it's interesting having running cattle in bigger groups like that. It's a challenge, really, the breeding end of things. Maybe it's an opportunity too.
Yeah, it means it's obviously it's difficult then to know what size what. So we changed our breeding strategy here so that we're moving on to Lincoln Reds from Lings and Simlings. And so this year, just all bar 1 bull that went out was Lincoln Red. And the only reason we had a limousine bull out was because he was still for sale and we had a lame bull. So predominantly we'll have 1 breed. So it doesn't really matter who the sire of the calf is unless we're pedigree breeding.
And what drove you to Lincoln Red? Why Lincoln Red over some of the other breeds that we see more commonly?
Obviously, native breeds work far better on extended season grazing, and we had our simlings were just too big. So we were looking for a smaller cow, and we had lings, and lings were a cracking cow. They're a brilliant maternal animal, but they don't have the shape and the flesh that we were looking for the butchery and for the end user. So we were looking around to see what other breeds were available that would do the job for us. And it was considered, obviously, the first one that comes to mind is the Angus. And why wouldn't we? Because East Coast Scotland, that would make much more sense than Lincoln Red. But what we found was that there was a huge difference between Angus types, and the breed had been significantly improved, and some of those traits were being lost on improvement. And we were looking for an unimproved breed as much as possible, because they held the characteristics of docility and longevity and all the other things. And the Lincoln Red was, again, East Coast. Yes, it's further south, but they've got a better shape than the Ling, and so we decided to try those, and we're reasonably pleased with the way they're working at the minute.
And effectively, I mean, in the past, the Lincoln Red and the Beef Shorthorn were the same breed. They're effectively, they do tick all the same boxes as your Shorthorns, or your traditional Shorthorns, and your Anguses do as well. So it's nothing too off the wall, really.
There are just fewer of them, I think. You don't see as many of them around, and from our perspective, it was, do we go black or red?
Excellent. So on the mob grazing system, so we would talk about rotational grazing a lot, and maybe daily shifts or 4-day shifts. Am I right in saying you're 90 days rest and 1 day graze? Is that the kind of system?
Well, that's a sort of ultimate, but as the season starts off, we will be shorter than that, and as the season ends, we'll be shorter than that. But at the peak of the season, we're looking for this 90-day rest. So cattle move daily. We just use a electric fencing system and a mobile water trough and above ground pipes in sections that we just pull around. And when we started that, the biggest fear was the labour requirement for doing that. And when you start out, you're all sort of fingers and thumbs. You make a mess of things, and things are difficult, and water pipes pop, and troughs get kicked over. And as we've gone on, we've sort of realised, simple and tidy is the way forward. And we can now shift. You can shift 200 young stock in 20 minutes, and that's checking every single one as they run past you. They're much easier to handle because they see you, and you bring them a fresh paddock every day, so they'll actually follow you anywhere you want. Which means that we can do it with fewer people, and we're not spending all the time opening and closing gates, jumping in and out of a pickup. And it's meant that they've been easy to handle in the winter, easy to handle getting them in and out of sheds. Bringing them back in the autumn time was a pleasure, walking them up the road quietly. Saved all the boxing and the rallying in the fields.
What about live weight gains for young stock? Are cattle performing on this system?
We haven't weighed any young stock this year yet. We weighed them when they went out. We haven't weighed anything during the season. I'm going on visual assessment of them, fat covering, condition. They're doing every bit as well, if not better, than before. It could be a seasonal thing. I think you have to see that over a period of time. What we've seen with calf weaning weights and cow condition is that they're no worse or better than they were on a set stock system. And this is one of the reasons that you have to throw out convention. We always gave our young stock the very best of lush grass at 6 inches tall, and would top it and manage it accordingly. And it feels wrong giving them seed heads, but they don't eat all the stalk, but they do like the seed heads, and they do like the clover underneath it. And I'm expecting us to be gaining 0.8 of a kilo a day over the growing season quite comfortably at grass as an average. Which, bearing in mind that they're native breeds, I think will do nicely. Yeah,
perfectly acceptable. That's good, and it'll be interesting to see as those herbal lays get going as well. Could that then rise to 0.9? Could it even be a kilo?
Yeah,
interesting viewing.
Well, chasing the kilos per head per day. In the back of my head is still, what's it cost you?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we can do it, if we can grow 0.8 of a kilo for less than somebody who's growing at a point, rearing at 0.9, if we're financially better off, well, why not?
Mm-hmm. in the infrastructure end of things, the biggest limiting factor would be water, and your water system, as you say, is mobile troughs. How expensive is that type of system to install? If you're working with a 100 cow system, is it a big investment to get into at the start, or is there quite a good payback on it?
No, I don't think it is a big investment to start with. Originally, we thought we had to lay out semi-permanent fences to make the fencing easier, and paddocks and extra troughs. And what we realised over time was that actually that didn't work well. What we needed was a small trough that you could manually chuck around that filled quickly. And we've set on the Kiwi trough system, which fills from the bottom, so it doesn't suit every system on the mains. You couldn't use it on mains. It has to be on either a header tank or on a private supply. But it fills very quickly, which means we can, at the trough, which is about 2 foot in diameter and maybe 18 inches deep, will supply enough for 100 cows, which... as long as you've got a bar of pressure, that was enough. So that part of it, the trough itself looks expensive. It's a couple of £100, but actually they're just about indestructible. And there's no bullcock issue with pipes pulling and bullcocks twisting and water overflowing, and you can throw them around by hand. The water pipes, we know we had to use black alkathene pipe above ground because it doesn't degrade in UV. It's slightly more expensive than blue. But what we realised was we just need to have 100 metre lengths of pipe with quick coupling fittings on either end, and we can just you could lay out a kilometre of pipe work in an hour and a half with one person on a bike.
And then shift it to a different field.
And then just as we finish one field, as we're creeping back up the pipework, we just take the pipes back up with us and lay them out in the next field so that it's ready to go. And when we put in 10 years ago, we put in a water system, alternative watering system for cattle on a set stock system. We were burying pipe and we were putting in tanks and buying concrete troughs, and it was great, but actually it was really expensive. This is much cheaper. You need the main infrastructure, but once you've got the main infrastructure, if you've got water in every field, pressure is then your next problem. Yeah. A lot of us rely on relatively small pipes and big troughs, and this system needs reasonable sized pipes and reasonable pressure.
Yep. Yeah. Now, the electric fence obviously is critical, and we know how we'll all have had experience of cattle bursting fences and going where you don't want them to go. What is your electric fence system? What have you installed for that?
We had predominantly got a mains electric fence system around the outside of every field anyway, and so we just hook up to that, and it provides enough. We've got 4,000 or 5,000 volts through it. That's plenty, and we just put a single strand of electric fence wire, but front and back of the paddocks. But at this time of year, when there's a lot of greenery, those main systems tend to arc out. So we just use mobile solar boxes that we can just move with the fence. They're only small Gallagher boxes, which means that we can always guarantee above 4,000 volts. We tend not to have many breakouts. When I say we can't say we don't have any. We don't have many, but where we do have them, they're in the early part of the season where cattle are learning. Yeah. And what we found was that the calves that grew up behind a fence respected it, and the calves that had never seen a fence before didn't. But now every calf on the place has been behind a fence. I think it'll get easier.
So it should be fine. And calves, are you meaning to wean at grass? Is that a plan this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's the next target, I suppose. We used to bring in cows and calves for a good couple of weeks, firstly so we could vaccinate for pneumonia, but also so we could get calves used to eating silage before they were weaned, just take out one more stressful sort of blip in their growth. But this year, the aim is, if we're going to keep cows outside, let's keep them outside all the time. And the plan is that we wean the calves onto grass and pull the cows away elsewhere. That way we don't need to bring them in, open the silage pit for a few weeks and then close it up again. We just do the whole thing with grass. I'll let you know how we get on trying to keep calves.
Yeah, I suppose it'll be trial and error, won't it? It's uncharted territory.
Yeah.
We've discussed at length the good parts of it. What are the drawbacks? Mob stalking. Why would you? What would make you stop doing it? Is there anything that would make you stop doing it?
Personally, no. I think it is when you see the result of keeping cattle off grass. Normally, when we set stock, cattle go along and they keep nibbling away all the fresh growth that's coming back up again. And we've always got plenty of grass ahead of them, but what we see is a gradual degradation of the grass seed mix. When we see what we're doing now, they go in, they eat the entire paddock and then they move on, but they're always leaving a lot of residual. It takes a bit of getting your head around leaving that residual behind because you think it's wasted. It's not. It's there next time you come around and it's a mat. And I think the biggest hurdle we've got is actually getting our heads around it and trying to get other people to see. You have to be doing it for long enough to see the results before you believe it. And to start with, it goes against every grain in your body. And that's exactly how I felt about it. The question I quite often get asked when we're grazing long grass is, why don't you cut it for hay? And I asked exactly the same question when we started, and the question was, what would you do with the hay? And I said, well, we'll feed it in the winter. And he said, why don't you just leave it in the field and feed it in the winter anyway?
Yeah.
Saves the bale. And you kind of
a mindset thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Sam, this has been a big step. It's a huge change to your business. What advice would you give to somebody? We've heard all the benefits of being in the system, but getting into it can be quite a big challenge. What advice have you got for somebody who's looking to start into regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, it is. Starting anything is different, and forcing change is always different. We became a field lab for the Soil Association, and we joined with a group of people who were all dabbling with the idea. Finding other people who are already doing something along those lines is quite good because you don't feel you're on your own. You're not the only lunatic in the area. But actually, if you want to do it quietly and don't tell anybody about it, best thing to do is just stick up an electric fence to divide a field in half. Let the other half come back and then switch them back over again in 10 days, 20 days, whatever you can, and just watch what happens. And gradually you'll then decide to stick up 2 fences and divide it into 4. It won't be long before you'll be worth buying the 3rd fence and moving them daily. But I think you can quietly try it and see the output and see the regrowth and see the extended season pretty quickly. What I would say is, if you're going to do it, start that process off when you've got plenty of grass ahead of you. Don't try and start it in March when you've been stocked with sheep all winter.
Mm-hmm. And at what stage do you sell the grass topper?
I'm not confident enough to sell the topper yet, although we still use it. We've got sheep in the rotation. We're still using it for topping new grass lays, just to get them down low enough for sheep, stop lameness and fly strike, etc. It's still a useful tool, but where we've used it incorrectly and we've topped a field after the cows have come out of it, we've paid the price because it's taken longer to come back than the fields we haven't. So we're using it less and less.
Yeah.
Now,
we're living in the world of Twitter and all kinds of different networking opportunities. Do you have a mentor? Do you have somebody that has helped you with this, or people that you follow that have allowed you to develop this interest and passion for this system?
Yeah, definitely. The confidence in trying it is going to see it, and knowing that somebody else is there to answer questions. And when I started doing this, I didn't really have that person, and we were winging it a bit. And I popped down to Herefordshire to go and see a guy called Rob Havard, who has been doing this on rented land for a good number of years and is very successful at it. And having seen his system, I started to kind of copy what he was doing. And suddenly you look at a water fitting and think, Christ, that's a simple way of doing it. Well, that's he was the first person I saw doing bale grazing, and whilst he's further south, he's actually in a wetter part of the country than we are. So that gave us the confidence to try it here. I think it is essential because there are plenty of YouTube clips, there are plenty of social media. There's a lot of information out there, but it's really hard to see how that's going to work on your own farm. A lot of it, when you've got somebody from Missouri telling you how to do it, it's difficult to really compute them. Yeah, it is.
Rob actually spoke at the Graze debate this year, and it was interesting because before him there was a lot of scientists, and then various farmers had given their conventional rotational grazing system, if that makes sense. They had described what they do and what a cracking job they were doing, and then Rob spoke, and you could nearly, basically people's jaws were hitting the floor, what he was achieving, level of inputs versus output and things, it really is working for him at that end. And these guys are all really keen to talk about it. It's interesting, it's exciting. For regenerative agriculture, the soil is the critical bit. So we've talked about cows and talked about grass and things, but have you got any evidence? Have you seen any soil analysis results or anything? Has your organic matter status changed since you started doing this?
We took whole estate organic matter samples before we started organic conversion. We did samples in GPS locations across the whole estate, every 20 acres. It's quite an expensive process. Mm-hmm. But we had to understand where we were starting from. Whilst we are seeing improvements, it's really difficult to see improvements quickly in soil organic matter. It's a very slow process. I'm not so worried about that, actually, because yes, I know it's good for us. Yes, I know that it sequesters carbon, and I know that it's a fantastic thing. But actually, for me, the proof is in the pudding. Does our land drain away faster than it used to? Yes. Can we hold more stock on the same area? Yes. And can we hold livestock outside without damaging soil for longer in the season? Yes. And for me, that's a proxy for soil carbon or soil organic matter.
Yeah. It's interesting because the easiest soil to increase the organic matter is the really badly managed arable soil, something that's been intensively cropped for decades. You then put cattle on it and the organic matter will change significantly quite quickly. Whereas some of your soils, particularly where you're bale grazing, are long-term grass soils and probably have a very high organic matter status anyway. So you're probably proportionately adding a little back in, but it certainly is. It'll be interesting to see how it goes down the line. And as you see, if it is actively improving the farm at your end.
Yeah, we've seen the biggest improvement in field performance on the worst fields we had, and the reason that they were the first ones we did this to. This mob grazing system on was because they were the worst, and they had always performed poorly in an arable rotation. They could grow a lot of grass in the peak of the season when you don't need it, and then they lost it at the shoulders of the season. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's where anybody who knows their farm will be able to tell you year on year whether they're seeing an improvement. And we see grass growing earlier in the season and still later in the season. The soil's warmer because it's got a blanket over it of all the trodden in, matted organic matter, and because of that, the productivity is higher.
Yeah, excellent. So, a broad question now: what is bale grazing? Can you describe or set up a bale grazing system in everyone's head?
The principle for our bale grazing system is that one hay bale, a round hay bale, let's say that round hay bale is 250 kilos, 300 kilos, will feed 25 cows. We'll be doing this with 100 cows in each group, so every day they'll need access to 4 round bales. We can't leave them as round bales and just take the nets off them because they'll push them through the electric fence, so we have to unroll them. And we lay out each field that we're going to do this in small paddocks, much smaller than you would graze in the peak of the growing season, because whilst they're going to eat the stored up grass beneath their feet, really the hay is their diet. And what we're looking to do is keep them in a small area, but for just 24 hours. And provided you don't have a sort of 3-inch rainfall day, that's fine. And then we move them the next day onto the next rolled out bales. And again, they have a fence behind them and a fence in front of them, and they're in that cell and they're perfectly happy. They keep good condition on them. Strip grazing, but with a back fence. And that means that they don't go back and trample and puddle where they've been. So it doesn't matter how wet it got. They're only on it for 24 hours. They don't do the damage. And part of that's because we'll have those fields that are being bale grazed. They'll be shut up at this time of year to get a good length of grass on them. and get the seed heads mature so that when cows go in there and stand on it, firstly, they've got a good base underneath them of lots of grass, but all that seed head is being trampled back into the ground as well. And that's what's going to improve the grass pastures in future years.
Are the bale grazing paddocks, are they always your dry sacrifice areas, or are they part of the rotation?
I'm experimenting with 3 different types this year. One is one that we did last year. We know what that is. It's a poor, unimproved grassland. One is a field that was undersown with, it was barley undersown. Barley was a really good crop. Grass wasn't a very good crop underneath it, as tends to happen. And then it got too many docks and thistles on it because of the bare ground. Docks and thistles being early adopted. Yeah, it's just too open. And the way we could plough it up, or we could try and stitch in, or we've tried those things. They don't work brilliantly. So I just thought, let's increase the amount of seed going back into the seed bed in grass terms. So that's an experiment that will be in grass for probably 7 or 8 years. If we might do it in there again, it's a field that is low in organic matter anyway. This isn't going to hurt it. And then we've got another couple of fields that we'll use, which are due to come out and go into a spring cereal. And so we'll almost sort of take them further towards destruction because we can, and we're going to plough them out anyway. And I'm hoping that they've effectively given us, they've done the dunging as well. So there's one less bill to pay for.
And the hay that you're making is mature seeds in the head, trying to get as much seed into that bale as well to actually reseed that paddock as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we are, and I'd like to be better at it. But of course, when you're making hay,
you do it when the sun shines.
Yeah, right. It would have been lovely to have taken it, a bit later in August, but I wouldn't want to risk that for hay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is the seed going into the next barley crop? Is that a worry, or is that? Can we deal with that?
I thought it was, which is why I didn't do it before, and I was considering bale grazing with silage, which you could do, but I don't fancy rolling out to silage bale. And
that would toughen you up anyway.
Yeah, I'm trying to cut out the plastic from the place. At one point that was costing us 60 quid a week to get rid of plastic, so I was sort of trying to cut those things out. So when I looked at our fields that we were growing organic cereals on, I realised that actually the grass weeds aren't the problem. Because they are tall, organic cereals grow tall, no growth regulators, right varieties, they grow tall, competition's there. Does it really matter if you've got grass at the bottom of it, if it's not competing? It might give you a bite for the sheep later. It's not seeing it as a negative, but actually not worrying about it.
And are you carrying less stock in this system, less cattle in this system, or are you at the same number as you were?
I'd like to have been up higher than we are now, but because of our change in breeding policy and the way that the market, I sort of lost a little bit of confidence at the start of the COVID crisis that we would struggle to get rid of organic beef. And so I was quite happy to shelve off some young stock for a margin then and drop the cow numbers a bit for this year, which actually suited me when it was incredibly dry early in the season. But as we put more land into the organic conversion, we've got more and more grass coming. We do need to put our stock numbers up.
We talk about resilience as well and developing resilient systems. And we know the system works in the winter, the bale grazing system, and even on some of your wetter land, it's working fine. What about in a dry spring? How exposed are you to a dry spring?
Well, since we've been doing this, we've had 2 dry springs, 2018 and this year. This year was slightly odd in the sense that we came out of an incredibly wet period straight into a dry period. The established grassland, there was no problem at all. We had masses of grass ahead of cattle. Where we struggled was on the new sown grass lays. They didn't come. They were the herbal lays as well, so they're a little bit slower in getting going. But what we could see clearly was that the herbal lays are now, when they're established and they're 2 or 3 years old, are now overtaking their conventional ryegrass clover mixes, particularly in a dry spring. They've just got the access to the nutrients and the moisture because of their deeper rooting. So that resilience for us, we want to take out, our climate's changing to the extent where we're seeing extremes for longer periods. We just want to take out those lumps and bumps, and this seems to give us ground cover to stop the evaporation of water. So where we've got long grass, we've still got long grass. Where it was bared off by sheep on some of our new grass lays, they struggle to come back, but they're fine now.
Yeah, it's interesting speaking to a lot of people, with herbal lays and particularly clovers and things. Anything with a taproot in a drought does well, and that's where, even go back to when Doug Avery was talking to us all. It was all about lucerne and having this big, deep taproot that can go right down and draw minerals and water from deeper in the soil, and that's that does the herbal lay thing does bring quite a lot of resilience to the system. The last time I was at Balcaskie, we walked through several fields of herbal lays, and I was astonished really by the diversity in there, and particularly not necessarily diversity of plants, but it's more like bees and pollinators and things that are there. Is Balcaskie a better place since you moved into the herbal lay end of things? Is it socially a better place, environmentally a better place to be?
It is, and it's always hard to put a number on that in terms of value, but in terms of agriculture's reputation, it is accelerating at a great speed. The amount of interest that we have, actually, after I met with you, we had Scottish Beekeepers Association wanted to come and bring hives on because they'd seen the herbal lays. And because they're untouched for 90 days, there's great bee foraging ground. And actually, what's our reputation worth as an industry, and how do we make sure other people see some benefit out of it?
Yeah. Roughly, so I know you're doing a bit of trial work, a bit of field lab work, but what's your ideal herbal lay? What's in there?
I keep changing it because herbal lays change over time anyway, depending on how we graze them. So what we thought in the first year when we were showing it versus what we think now has changed. And predominantly, we want those deeper rooting, less competitive grass species. So the ryegrass is great, and we think it's fantastic. It's high in sugar and it's got everything going for it and great volume. But what we realise is livestock, actually, given a choice, wouldn't eat it, or they eat it far less than they do some of the older species. Mm-hmm. We started off with a sort of fairly narrow band of species in the grass mix, but we have gradually increased it. We basically went from maybe having 5 or 6 different species in it to then having a total scattergun approach to it. And then now we've refined it because some of those species we were putting in are just not competitive enough to come up. So we know that chicory is fantastic. It establishes really, really well, but it doesn't last for that long. We've been planting burnet and yarrow and basically picked up the old books from the 1800s and found out what they were using because they didn't have the tools that we were playing with chemicals and fertilizers. And so we're starting to see things like cocksfoot and timothy, meadow fescue, tall fescue, sheep's fescue being added in, vetches, and we've still got some ryegrass in there, but we just pegged it back a bit just to give the others a chance.
It's interesting, the species you're mentioning are probably reasons, I was going to say 20 years ago, even a few years ago would be reasons for a reseed. The swing in what we're wanting, the ryegrass, it grows like nothing else, provided you feed it, and it's very nitrogen hungry. It's one-dimensional, whereas these other things together are, it's tremendous to see what they can actually do if it's properly managed.
Yeah, it is. And when we did some trials this year where we were sowing strips of individual species across a field, and then we see where the sheep graze. It was only sown last year, but next year we'll try cattle on it. And you've got these lovely strips of clover and ryegrass that you think are really productive in the early part of the year, and you think, why aren't the sheep standing on there eating that? And they're standing on the bare bit, nibbling away on the lesser known species. But we thought that ryegrass was the answer, red clover, but I think it's sort of like eating a bowl of pasta every day. You kind of want to change now and again.
Yeah. And what you're saying about if you are going to go down the herbal lay road, it has to be on a rotational grazing basis and give them a rest.
It doesn't have to be. I think putting in a herbal lay is actually beneficial for that resilience, but I definitely think you get more out of it because you allow the plant to rest, get to the mature stage before you. One of the really simple visual things for us was If you graze up to 40% of the leaf off a plant, you only use up 2 to 3% of the root reserves to get it to regrow. So it's almost continually growing. You're not shocking it. The minute you go over 50% of that plant leaf, you start using up, considerable up to 30, 40% of the root reserves. When you go over 60, 70%, you can be using up 80% of root reserves. Mm-hmm. And we've all seen it when you've hammered a field too hard and it takes forever to come back. And when you skim over it, trample it in and keep going, the total biomass that you can grow in the year is increased because the solar panel of the leaf is there for longer, or there's more solar panel effectively. And these old species, that's how they were. That's why they still succeeded. They still survived. That's where you watch cattle in a hedgerow. They go and eat all the sort of unproductive stuff around the outside before they get a mouthful of ryegrass.
Interesting, and that's really what we need to do: is look at cattle, look at what cattle want rather than what looks good.
Took the decision last year to stop buying minerals. Again, this was a little bit of a kind of if this goes wrong, it goes probably badly wrong. But we decided that our mineral bill, we were buying in minerals and the animals were getting minerals whether they liked it or not. We sugarcoat them with molasses and wonder why they're going for them. So we thought we'd take a slightly different approach to it. We're not pushing the grass as hard because there's no fertilizer going on. We're not pushing the cattle as hard because there's no cereal in the diet. We've gone to grass-fed only. And surely they can survive without minerals. And the only way we could check it is we keep doing blood samples at different times of year on different groups of animals to see if they're starting to show any deficiencies. And, I do hope I'm not going to have a disastrous PD result this year because of it. But we are seeing, there's another 17,000 knocked out of our annual bills.
It is a risk, and it's something that can only be done regular blood samples, regular forage analysis, and there could well be, deficiencies down the line and things. The one that would concern me would be, stagger, something like magnesium that's such a short term, they've no store for magnesium and such a catastrophic end point that, that there's worries like that. But as far as minerals for growing cattle and things, it's interesting. And if you're on herbal leys and deeper rooting plants that are going down deeper into the soil, perhaps they're pulling up different minerals and creating a more balanced diet as well.
Yeah, and if you ask the people who've been doing this for a long time, all over the world, a lot of them will tell you that you can't ignore minerals. If you are deficient, you are deficient. Yep. Naturally, an animal would have ranged over hundreds of miles and it would have had different soil types to go from, but we fenced them into a few acres. Mm-hmm. So they don't have that ability to pick up new minerals.
Yeah, interesting. With caution, very interesting. Now, there was something you said, again, the last time I spoke to you, Sam, about young people and the future for this type of system. What opportunities do you think the future holds for this?
Well, I think we've struggled to bring in people who've got a conventional mindset into this system because you have to let go of let the armbands go and jump out in the deep end. And so all your preconceived knowledge is it's not useless because it's still there, but you feel vulnerable because you're not doing what your instinct's telling you. What we found is that people who haven't done it before and haven't got a preconceived idea of conventional agriculture are much more able to learn and become enthusiastic about it and drive it forward. But I also see that in the future of young entrants into agriculture, there'll be a lot of people out there with degraded soils who want grass in the system but can't afford to put in the infrastructure. And I would like to think that there's an opportunity out there for some young lads to go out with some electric fences and mobile troughs and take blocks of ground and increase the fertility for free. You don't need to pay a rent. You're putting the rent in the soil carbon or in the fertility. And as a model, I'd like to see that work somewhere else.
And as an industry, we're obviously under quite a lot of pressure, environmentally. And is the future bright for the Scottish red meat sector?
Yeah, I think it is, and particularly if Scotland recognises as a whole its position. It's already got that sort of premium product, and in everybody's head globally, Scotland is about green and natural. And I think it's really important that we make sure that what we're doing in terms of rearing red meat, we're doing it in a green and natural way, rather than doing it in the same way that you could do it in a feedlot, because it's, you may as well do it in a feedlot or a petri dish. And if we want a premium position, we've got to protect that way of production. I think it has got a real future, because I think there'll always be people around the world who'll want to eat the very best, and I think Scotland can do it.
Yeah, and it takes us right back to what you said at the very start about telling a story and engaging with your consumer. And as a country, as an industry, we need to do that. We need to shout about the good stuff we're doing, and make sure the good stuff we're shouting about is actually stuff that we're doing. We've got excellent people, we do have an excellent climate for producing beef. Beef and lamb, we do have plenty of opportunities out there. And I hope we're both right that the future is bright. But what we know today is outside the weather is bright, and I'm sure you've got plenty to do. So I'll, at this stage, thank you very much, Sam. I've thoroughly enjoyed that, and I hope our listeners will enjoy it too. We've actually got a case study on Balcaskie bale grazing and a holistic system, which will be available on the Farming for a Better Climate website. But at this stage, I'll just thank you very much, Sam, and wish you all the best with your future.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Robert. And we'll always be happy to go and help somebody else get set up doing it.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. For more information on the topics covered, please visit the Farming for a Better Climate website, and you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.